Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to I Have Something to Say. And I do. You know, 28 months ago, I had a stroke, and I didn't know what my life would be like moving forward. But I have so much hope for the future. And I learned to talk again. I learned to read again, and I learned to write again. It was hard work. It was depressing. It was, I had to get my mindset right. But today I have a real life Wonder Woman on my show, Angie Collins-Burke. Her story is so amazing. So without further ado, I want to bring her on the show. Ready, set. Hey, Angie.
Hi.
Good to see you. And I really was excited about this show. In the midst of the hurricane and everything, I was still excited about the show because in talking with you, you have such a unique perspective because you were a nurse. And I just really am glad you're on the show. So welcome to the show. And if you don't mind, share with us your pre-stroke story.
Okay. So as you said, I am a nurse. I was a registered nurse. I worked at the hospital in the community where I live for 26 years, and I specialized in palliative care. And I loved my career, but it was challenging juggling shift work, and sometimes I did work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. My husband and I have 2 sons. At the time of my stroke, my oldest son was away at college, and my youngest son was in high school. So my life was crazy busy and a little overwhelming at times.
So how long had you been a nurse?
26 years.
26 years. You don't look old enough to uh, do 26 years. So tell us about your stroke event. What happened?
The day of the stroke, I had actually been suffering from what I thought was a migraine for a few days, and I finally admitted defeat, and my husband took me to the hospital where I was diagnosed as a migraine and treated for one and sent home.
Really?
Yes, we literally had just gotten in the door. My husband had gone to let the dog out, and he heard a crash. So he came to the bedroom, and he found me on the floor. I was having a seizure. The left side of my body wasn't moving. My face was drooping, and he immediately knew what had happened and called for the ambulance. And I was taken to the hospital where I actually worked.
Wow. So did you go to the hospital where you actually worked and they diagnosed it and sent you home or not?
That was the migraine, but I went back to the hospital after I had collapsed. And unfortunately, it took 3 days to discover that I had had a stroke. The first 2 CAT scans were negative. And they unfortunately weren't necessarily listening to my husband. He was quite frustrated because he was trying to tell them this is what happened.
Can I ask a question? Is that your husband, Bill Burke?
Yes.
Oh, he's on the screen. Hey, Bill. Okay. So continue.
And so he was very frustrated because they weren't hearing what he was trying to tell them. But to look at me, I didn't have one risk factor for stroke. So they did consult Sunnybrook, which is a trauma center in Toronto. It's the largest trauma center in Canada. And they said, you need to do an MRI, which they did. And that showed that I had suffered a large stroke and that it was caused from a carotid dissection. And I was immediately then transported to the trauma center in Toronto.
Wow. So how long were you in the hospital?
I was in the hospital in the community where I live for 3 days. When I arrived at Sunnybrook, I was admitted to the intensive care unit there because my brain was swelling with what's a midline shift, so it was starting to shift. So I spent some time in the ICU, and eventually I was put into the step down unit. And as the swelling subsided and things improved, I was then sent to the medical floor. Because the small community hospital where I lived doesn't have, or at the time didn't have, a stroke specific rehab, they didn't feel comfortable with sending me back. So I ended up going to a rehab hospital in Toronto to do the majority of my rehab.
Wow. What did you realize that you had a stroke instantly?
I was unconscious, and for 3 days I was unconscious. And then when I did start coming around, I was in and out. So I'd be kind of awake for a few minutes and then I would black out again. So it wasn't until it was probably a good week or so before I realized what had happened.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah. For me, I didn't know what had happened. I couldn't talk. I couldn't read, couldn't write. They whisked me away in an air ambulance. And funny story for another day, but I would have been better off if they had taken me by covered wagon. So anyway, I just realized I couldn't talk, but I could hear everything. And I didn't know anything about aphasia. And it was staggering for me to learn that you could talk one day and not talk the next. It was staggering. What was your aha moment?
that I had the stroke, or in my journey?
In your journey?
Okay, so it took a while. I guess I'm a slow learner, but my aha moment was quite a ways away from when I had the stroke, and it was when I realized that how well I recovered, and how much of my deficits, or how many of my deficits I improved, was largely up to me. In fact, it was entirely up to me. The therapists, the doctors could give me every tool they had in their toolbox, but it was ultimately my decision to use them and to work hard, and it was my recovery. So I had to do the work.
So I want to ask you this. We talked about this beforehand. Tell me about the when you had your stroke, about being depressed, and take me through that segment of your journey, please.
When I first came home from the rehab hospital, I was ready to fight. I was ready to give it all. But unfortunately, as the reality set in of how my life had been affected, my mood started to slip, and it got darker and darker. It got, unfortunately, to a point that one evening my husband caught me with a handful of pills.
Mm.
He took me to the hospital and I was admitted and I was treated for my depression.
It's so important that we have the courage, like you, to talk about this, because people that have strokes, people that have aphasia, people that have traumatic brain injury, they suffer with that a lot. They're left to suffer in silence. In my case, I couldn't talk. I was so depressed early on because I wanted to talk so bad and I couldn't. And it was hard. It was hard. How did you break through that?
The help, there was a lot of components. The help I obviously received in the hospital. I was started on an antidepressant, which I had initially refused to take. I have epilepsy now from my stroke, And when the doctor originally wanted to start me on an antidepressant, he said that there is a chance it could lower your seizure threshold. And I immediately said no, because I was terrified of having another
Yep.
seizure. And so I continued to spiral. But once I was in the hospital and I was being monitored, I started to take it. I received counseling. I received a lot of love and support from family and friends. And
So
eventually,
important. So important.
so important. And
Yeah.
eventually I started to claw my way out of it.
You know, that's a good analogy. It's like clawing out of a rut. You, just one step at a time so you can see over. I see sunshine and you crawl out. It's so important. What was the original diagnosis? What did they tell you about your future?
My neurologist at Sunnybrook was very honest with me. He basically said, we don't know, because every stroke is so different and every stroke recovery is so vastly different. We don't know. So he was very honest with me. He didn't give me false hope. He didn't say you'll never be able to do this. He just said, well, time will tell.
That's so good because in my case, if I had believed the diagnosis, I would just gone home and not talked again. you know,
That's one of my pet peeves as both a stroke survivor and a nurse, is when people use the word never. So many times stroke survivors are told you'll never be able
oh
to
yeah,
do this, and
oh yeah,
maybe the chances are slim, but never is definite. It's almost as if they're saying don't even bother trying because it's not going to happen, and
exactly.
that frustrates me so much.
You know, Angie, when I went home, my son walked in my garage. I was holed up in my garage and uh, painting, by the way. And he walked in, said, "Dad, I'm going to give you something. It's a pre-K kindergarten book. You've been a speaker all over the world. I know it's hard, but you've got to start somewhere. And I believe you can talk." When he walked out that room, it was on because he believed in me. You can talk. It's so uh, um, annoying to have people rob your hope. Say never, never, never. That should never be done, ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really appreciate you sharing that. What was when you first had your stroke and when you were in the hospital, how important was family surrounding you, being supportive? Tell me about that.
For me, it was very difficult because I was an hour and a half to 2 hours away from my community,
Mm.
uh, at both Sunnybrook and the rehab hospital. So my husband came to visit me when he could, but he was working full time. He now had to take on all of the tasks that I had previously done. So he would visit me when he could, but I didn't have my family and friends around me because they were back home and I was in the city away. So that was very, very difficult.
I'm
I
sure.
Yeah, I felt very alone. I was in a surrounding that I didn't recognize with faces I didn't recognize, and I was so horribly homesick. It was horrible.
You know, I was too because I lived in Chattanooga when I had my stroke, and I was in Shreveport, Louisiana. Thank God my daughter was there. So my family came to see me, but when I went back, I had to deal with all kinds of isolations. So that's how how important, from your perspective, is mindset.
Extremely. And I'll give you an example that I like to use. When I first had my stroke, and some people would refer to me as a stroke victim, And stroke, some people would refer to me as a stroke survivor. And in the beginning, I didn't really give it much thought. I thought it's just words. But then I realized, yes, it is extremely important. Yet
Yes.
that when it first happened to me, yes, I was a victim. I didn't ask for this. I didn't decide, I think I'll have a stroke today. But, you know,
I'm sorry. Me either.
yeah. But at some point, I realized that I didn't have to remain a victim, and that I could fight back, and I could, improve my life, and that no, I'm a survivor. And so when people now refer to me as a stroke victim, immediately I will correct them. No, I'm a survivor.
Exactly, because if victim mentality doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. You need to have hope. Optimism is an intellectual choice. I choose to be optimistic, and I choose to have the right mindset. I choose to be a warrior, not a victim. Victors over aphasia, victors over stroke, and we can all do it. Tell me about, I have a pet peeve, I'm going to tell you, the way people treat a person with a stroke. So we're going to have a good conversation about that. So tell me about, did you have any occasion to have people roll their eyes? I did. So tell me about that.
Yes. When I first had my stroke, I was in a wheelchair, so people could see that I had a physical disability, whatever you want to call it. But now, to look at me, I look perfectly normal. So when I go out in public, people don't understand why I'm struggling. It takes me longer to find something when I'm doing groceries. It takes longer for my brain to remember, what are you looking for? And oh, there it is. And I find going to the grocery store, for example, is very overwhelming to my brain, because there's music, there's pages, there's people everywhere, there's bright
Yes.
lights. So it's difficult. And so yeah, people don't understand why it's taking me longer, why I'm struggling to pack up my groceries when I'm done, because my left hand, yes, I'm grateful I can use it now, but it still has a mind of its own. So yes, I have had people roll their eyes at me. I've had people push me out of the way,
Wow.
because I have an invisible disability. And I think it's very important that people recognize that just because somebody looks fine on the outside doesn't mean they're fine on the inside. And I mean, I'm not just talking stroke, I'm talking, mental
Yes.
struggles. It could be somebody's just having a bad day. They may have a learning disability. We don't know. So it's.
When I first started going to the store, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody about this. That was the hardest thing for me. I would walk around that store looking, and I knew what I wanted to get, but I couldn't see it. I just couldn't see it. And I can remember spending 2 hours in the store trying to find 6 items. And nobody would help me. I tried to get somebody's attention, and he said, "Can you say anything?" I said, I was pointing, and he just brushed me off. We have a reason to be a stroke warrior, not a victim. We need to tell this story because it's so important. How did you deal with it?
I'm honest. If I'm struggling and somebody rolls their eyes at me, I'll say, I've had a stroke. I have a brain injury. Uh, I just flat out tell them, like, I'm doing the best I can. And, I've had people be rude to me, and really, that's their issue. And I used to internalize it. I'd come home and I'm so upset and I'm so embarrassed, and
Yeah,
I thought that's giving them power over me, and I cannot
exactly.
let that happen. That's their issue. It's not mine. I'm doing the best that I can. I can't do any more than that.
Deborah just said, I've been called names.
Hmm.
And, can you hurry up?
Yes.
Can you hurry up? What are you talking about? I'm trying to say one word.
Yeah. Or the
Can
good
you
old,
hurry up?
the
I know,
you
you
get that a
know,
lot too.
exactly. But we are all thrivers. Salud said, and Deborah said, Bill Burke, um, you're a husband, and what did Leslie say? Please don't get it unless something happens to them. I believe that's true. Most people don't get it.
Hmm.
Don't get it. What can we do to raise awareness so we can bring it to the forefront, in your opinion?
Well, I am trying my best to bring awareness by doing a lot of things, speaking to groups about my journey and highlighting many of the unseen challenges that stroke survivors have. And despite our journeys being vastly different, many of the challenges we face are very similar. I do post videos on YouTube for the same thing, and I've covered a lot of it in my book. And there's one chapter actually dedicated to healthcare professionals to try and enlighten them to what life is like for us.
Exactly. Where did the title come from?
Just pick up the peg. I was in occupational therapy, and it's an exercise that many stroke survivors are probably familiar with. They were trying to get my affected hand working again, and there was a wooden board in front of me with holes drilled in it, and my task was to pick up a peg, and I was supposed to try and put it in one of the holes. And of course, my hand wasn't doing what I wanted it to, so I started talking to it. Just pick up the peg. Just That's all you have to do. Just pick up the peg.
Wow, just pick up the peg. That's such a great analogy, such a great title. Your book is available on Amazon,
That is
right?
correct.
I'll put it in the show notes when we finish. Tell me about your book. Tell me about, just brag on your book. Go ahead.
Okay. So there's different components to the book. The underlining is my story because I was hoping that it would offer stroke survivors hope, encouragement. But throughout the book, there are highlighted or tip boxes. Some of them are insight into things that I learned from my journey in dealing with depression, in dealing with frustration. There's one there called the what if syndrome, which I think many of us get caught up in. What if I
Yeah.
hadn't had the stroke? What if I have another stroke? And what I learned that was, and what I needed to do to get out of that, dealing with frustration. But there are also highlights in the book of things that I wanted to bring to the attention of friends of stroke survivors, family, caregivers, health professionals, about neuro-fatigue and just how debilitating that can be for us, loss of identity and trying to travel through that, and just what we talked about, life with an invisible disability, and how, don't be so judgmental of someone just because they look fine. So there are different things that I wanted to highlight that hopefully would help people understand sort of what life is like through our eyes. I also wanted to give stroke survivors a voice.
Uh,
So many times I would hear, I wish people understood. I wish people understood. And I thought, I have an opportunity to give them a voice with this book. So I went on to social media to a few stroke survivor groups that I belong to, and I posted, if you could tell people one thing about stroke, what would it be? And I got hundreds of responses. I organized them into categories, and the final chapter, which is called The Last Word, is entirely written by stroke survivors and what they wanted people to know.
That's amazing. So, can you share a few things that they wanted people to know?
A lot of it was talking about, the depression, the frustration of not being able to use, their left arm, for example, about isolation and how they were treated by their families and how many of their friends just kind of disappeared and dealing with loneliness. But there were also positive about hope and never giving up. So there was changes in their life, and they wanted to talk about how different their life is now and how they've overcome. So there was a wide variety of kind of like hope, misunderstandings too, like just because I look fine doesn't mean I'm fine. And so
Exactly. You know, Salud just ordered your book right now on Amazon. So thank you, Salud,
thank
for.
you.
And if you can put the Amazon order in your show notes, Salud, I would appreciate it. Salud is so amazing. She's a caregiver for Tom. She keeps us all straight. She does. I don't know what I would do without Salud. Um, One other thing, when you were laying in the hospital, and what was the big difference in you laying in the bed and being the nurse? you know, it
I
had
often
to be.
Yeah, I often say that I wished I could have gone back to being a nurse after my stroke. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to, because I think I would have been so much, it would have helped me be a better nurse, understanding what it was like, to me before the stroke. A call bell, you'd see the call bell, you think, oh my goodness, another call bell. But
Yes,
then when I was in the bed completely helpless, I understood what the other person at the end of that call bell was,
yes,
how desperate they were. They needed help,
yes.
and how different that was. And instead of being the one giving care, I was the one receiving care. And I learned things. For example, when we used to send people for a test, we would explain this is what's going to happen and that's what's going to happen. But as a patient, at least for me, it wasn't necessarily the test that was the most frightening part. It was waiting for those results.
Yes.
It was, is it going to show that I'm getting better? Is it going to show I'm getting worse? Is it going to show I've had what is it going to show? So just a
The
different.
anxiety, the
Exactly.
anxiety, it was massive when I said, when they came in and told me in front of my children, and they were talking about me sitting in the bed, one addressing me, just referring to me. Your dad will never speak again. He's going to have to find another way to communicate. I was so mad. And they sent me for a secondary MRI. And I was anxious because of the prognosis. I believe if I went and took this test, they're going to find out I would never talk again. I was just distraught.
Mhm.
And I think what you said is so important, dealing with not the test, but the thought of what's going to come back. How would you suggest that they do that?
A lot of times when I'm experiencing negative or fear, or I find that trying to maybe take my mind away from that helps. Because, I mean, being afraid and worrying about it isn't going to change the results. They're going to be what they're going to be. So I may meditate, I may listen to music, maybe talk to a friend on the phone, journal how I'm feeling, just something to break that worrying cycle. Because again, the worrying It's not going to change anything.
Yeah. So tell me about the competitive bodybuilding. I was shocked, and I asked you, did you work out before? And you said no. I can't believe it. So tell me about that. How did you get started?
A lot of what has happened.
You're jacked, by the way. Your husband is too, but you're jacked.
Well, he has. Thank you. Thank you. A lot of what has happened to me on my journey has not been intentional, and I'll explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
You know, the first time I sat down at my computer to type, I had no intentions of writing a book, but that's kind of where my journey led me. The first time I picked up a weight, it was a little 2 or 3 pound weight. And the reason I picked it up is because I was trying to strengthen my left arm to get it stronger because it was weak from the stroke. And I really enjoyed it. I liked it. And I ended up buying a little weight set, and eventually I was able to work up to the 5 pound weight, and et cetera, et cetera. And eventually I realized, okay, this is costing me a fortune. I have to keep going out and buying bigger weights. So I mustered up the courage to join the gym. And I had never stepped foot in a gym prior to my stroke. And here I was now at the time, 49 years old.
Really? That
No.
gives me hope. I'm 63.
So I was 49 years old, never been in a gym before, had a stroke. Okay, let's join a gym. Seems like a really good idea. So I did. And I found a wonderful trainer who agreed to help me. The first session he spent entirely on assessing me. He assessed my strengths, my weaknesses, my range of motion, my balance, and he designed a workout regimen for me to start to follow. And I did that, and I really liked it. I liked feeling my arm getting stronger, and I liked seeing these little baby muscles starting to pop out. And when that happened, I was hooked.
You were hooked.
I was hooked.
How many times a week do you work out?
Generally 4 to 5.
How long?
It depends. An hour and a half. Depends on how I'm feeling that day. I mean, if I've had a poor night's sleep and the neuro-fatigue is really bad, I realize that I need to rest and I'll take the day off. But my husband eventually figured if you can't beat him, join him. So he joined the gym as well.
Really?
And during it's kind of funny how my stroke journey had a ripple effect. My husband had struggled with obesity for most of his life. And believe it or not, when he started his journey after my journey, he was 315 pounds, and he's lost 140 pounds, and he's now into bodybuilding. So we're gym buddies.
Gym buddies. Who's stronger?
Oh, he is.
He is.
He is.
So, I see you. Do you do a lot of CrossFit?
I don't specifically do CrossFit, but there are some. There is some equipment at the gym that you could if you wanted to, and every now and again I'll use that just to change it up because I like to change out my workouts and do something different. So. Mm-hmm.
So tell me how many competitions you entered.
So far, I've done 2.
Okay.
The first one I wanted to do just to see if I could do it. Just to prove to myself I could do it. I could overcome. And so I actually surprised myself. My only goal was to say I had done it. But at the awards ceremony, I was surprised when a second place trophy was placed in my hand. I had finished second.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I had finished second in master's figure.
Wow.
But when I watched the videos of myself on stage after, I could see that I was struggling with my balance. And I felt like I could do better. I could probably do a better job if I had another shot at it. So I decided a few months later to step on stage for a second time. So I competed a second time.
How did you do?
I ended up coming in third that time in master's figure.
Well, congratulations. Do you plan on doing it again?
I don't think I'll compete again. I did what I set out to do. Um, I still love working out of the gym. I still love the bodybuilding aspect of it, which I don't plan on giving up. But competing it's very hard on you. It's hard on a person who's completely healthy, but throw in a brain injury and some of the challenges I have. It's extremely difficult and it's extremely expensive. So I don't at this point plan on competing again. But who
Well,
knows what the future may hold.
can I say something? Denise said it really helps when we have the support of your husband doing it with you. I don't have that. Unfortunately, my husband is not very supportive. Um, that's wonderful that he lost all that weight. And so, what would you say to somebody in that case? It's hard.
It is. It's difficult for me because I haven't experienced that. My husband has been, I'm going to get emotional, but I can't even tell you
That's okay.
how supportive my husband has been of me. And I haven't made it easy for him. I mean, not intentionally, but when I went through the depression, it was difficult. Um, and so my heart, I feel for people that don't have that support, but I've also received a lot of support from people that I've met online through social media. And so I've even connected with some of them through Facebook Messenger calling and been able to talk to them and offer them support for people that that don't have that in their experience. They don't have support systems, so I can be that for them.
You know, one thing I have to say, just like your husband, what you gave him a hard time. I gave my kids a hard time because I was so distraught. I just wanted to talk, and I wasn't the best sometimes. I was angry. I was depressed, and it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to not be okay sometimes. It's okay to say what you want to say. And so I just thank God my kids are forgiving. They love their dad. So uh, one of the things that I want, oh, Bill said, your husband, she is my world. There's nothing I would not do to support her. Hey, Bill, hats off to you. What's not to like? What's not to support? She's amazing, amazing. Look. I know you look. Look at that picture. Woo! So good. So you know, one of the things I want to ask. When you had your stroke, it's coming on 7 years, right?
In 2 days, it'll be 7 years.
Wow, 2 days. Congratulations on your stroke anniversary. 7 years. Uh, Tell me what's the most important thing you've learned?
Probably how you treat yourself. I developed a very bad habit when I was learning to cope with the deficits I'd been left with, both the cognitive and the physical. And I started putting myself down,
Mm,
not just in my mind, but saying it. I would struggle and I would call myself stupid, or I would call myself, you're an idiot, or you think of any negative thing.
self-talk.
And,
Self.
and I would never, ever, ever say that to someone else. So why was it okay that I was saying it to myself? It wasn't. And if you say it to yourself enough, you start to believe it.
Yeah.
So self-love and being proud of what you've accomplished, and not putting yourself down. Just because you may struggle, you're still valuable. You still are important. And I'm still me. I just may struggle a little bit more. I still have something to offer.
You know, self-talk is so, either way, if you put yourself down, you absolutely believe it. It's like planting weeds in your garden.
Mm-hmm.
They'll grow and grow and grow, and they'll stifle all your positive thoughts, and you'll become depressed, and you'll self-loathing is a real thing. I teach everybody to do affirmations that's positive. Do you do affirmations?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. And every night I sit down and I write down at least 5 things that I am proud of myself for doing that day. And they don't have to be big accomplishments.
Exactly.
Uh,
Just
and
a goal.
yes, just to remind myself that I'm doing good things, and it's okay to feel proud of things and feel pride for yourself.
You know, I when I first had my stroke, I said I just wrote down like I wanted to say a phrase, and I was so proud that I could actually say a phrase, little bitty phrase, but that was the first step towards me making progress. I had a glimpse of what I could do.
Mhm.
And it was so important. And my mom told me, she was my number one supporter. She told me every day, record that video, even if you don't think you do well, record it anyway.
Mhm.
So I charted my progress. And sometimes I just posted a video yesterday that I did 4 months after I had my stroke. And it was amazing to watch and have I come so far, and I just did the work, but it was hard. But worthwhile work is hard.
Mhm.
It is hard. You didn't go to the gym and just, I didn't work out, I'm muscular. You had to build it step by step by step. I love your, oh, I like that little muscle that's popping up. I think that was a really good point. Did you, when you first had your stroke, like over the years, how many people have you had the opportunity to share your story with? I know you do keynote speeches. Can you tell me about one of your favorites?
Actually, it was to a community group, and it was people that had all different challenges. Some were stroke survivors and some weren't. And there was a woman there who had recently had a stroke, and she was really struggling. And because we live in a small community, there isn't always the opportunity to speak with somebody who's been through it. So after I was done my speech, I sat down with her and we talked for, it must have been an hour to an hour and a half, because she finally had somebody that she could speak with that could validate how she was feeling and understood how she was feeling and had actually lived it. It wasn't a healthcare professional that had read it from a book or that had heard it from lecture. It was somebody that had actually walked through the journey. And just to make that connection with her was fantastic.
You know, there's nothing like that moment when you know that someone got it. The eyes, you can tell it in your eyes. I was a teacher and I loved it. I said forever teaching is heart work, not hard work, heart work. I love to teach. I love that moment where you know that somebody got it. Their life will never be the same. It's important that we all get into the stroke education business because we know we've done that. We've been through the depression. We've been through the anxiety. We clawed our way back. So who better to say it than you? I mean it. It's so important. So what's your big dream now? What's your goal?
My goal would be to continue on the path that I'm on, to be an advocate for stroke survivors and to continue to spread awareness. And I'm not talking about, the signs and symptoms of stroke, because I think that's been fairly well covered, but just to some of the struggles that we face. And I try to stay connected with stroke survivors so I know sort of what the main struggles are, and just to bring that to the forefront to, healthcare professionals, and to make people aware that just because, and I've said this many times, that we may look like we're doing fine, that there are things that we struggle with. And I mean, I don't know how many times I've read on the groups, families calling their stroke survivor, their loved one, their friend, lazy. Well, it's because they don't understand neuro-fatigue and how debilitating it is, and to try and explain that so that they have some understanding that no, they're not lazy. They're exhausted. I mean, I was a nurse for 26 years. I worked shift work. I would sometimes go 24 plus hours without sleep, but neuro-fatigue, when I'm done, I'm done.
Can you talk about that? You were a nurse for years. Talk about neuro-fatigue and the effect it has on stroke victims. I'm telling you, when I am exhausted, I can't talk. I can't talk. I try to find my words, but I get so frustrated, and I have to get myself in the right mindset. I would be talking. I said, I would prefer to have this conversation in the morning. I'm exhausted. Well, I just need to keep you on the phone a little while. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so tell me, from your perspective, tell me about neuro-fatigue. What should a person do? How do you get yourself the proper amount of rest? Just talk about that, if you don't mind.
Okay. And of course, the challenge with being a stroke survivor is many times for us, our sleep is disrupted due to the stroke itself, where many of us have issues with chronic pain. So we need the sleep, but we can't get the sleep. And I know for me personally, when neuro-fatigue sets in, all of my deficits become more pronounced. My balance starts to go. I've actually had a couple of falls because I've tried to push myself. I start to struggle to put my thoughts into words. I'll even start crying. My emotions will start to get the better of me. My left hand completely, I can't do anything with it. And so anger, frustration, and it just becomes this vicious circle. So, and I'm a type A. Yes.
Loop. Continuing. Yep.
And I'm a type A personality.
No way.
You probably figured out. But so for me to admit defeat is very hard. But again, I've learned over time, there's no point in pushing myself because it's just going to end up being a complete mess. So I just lay down, and even if I can just close my eyes and rest for a half an hour just to let that, my brain recharge itself. And then I can hopefully carry on with my day.
It's if you push it past neuro-fatigue, it doesn't work out well at all.
Nope.
I believe people get angry, not at the other person, just angry that they can't push through that. And they try, and the anger grows and it grows, the frustration grows and it grows. I said negative emotions don't like to hang out by themselves. If you get frustrated, you'll get angry. If you get angry, you'll get mad. If you get mad, you'll be pissed off. And it just grows and grows and grows. Take a break. go lay down, live to fight another day, watch something, music, something to get yourself some rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. What did Salud say? I know neuro-fatigue, yes, definitely need to rest immediately. My daughter has neuro-fatigue. So this is an important subject, and we have an expert in our midst. And thank you very much. Jerry said, same here. The talking is so jumbled, I just have to lay down, maybe not sleep, just rest. Rest is so important.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you say about the dealing with a stroke? What would you say 7 years in is the most important thing you have learned to deal with this event that took place in your life?
One day at a time. When I, in the beginning, would look ahead, I would get overwhelmed, and also trying to live in the present moment. This moment that we're right now, that we're sharing right now, that's all we have. And what's in the past, that's gone. Can't do anything about that. What's coming down the pipe, there's no point in worrying about that. We can't change that. So just trying to learn to do everything mindfully and be present and focus on what do I need to be doing right now.
You know, I have a thing I've taught for years, and people ask me, what's the best time management class you can ever go to? I said, write this down. What's important now? WIN, what's important now? That's all you can control. So when I go through my day, I said, what's important now? Do my affirmations. What's important now? Eat a good breakfast. What's important now? Drink water. What's important now? That keeps me focused. It keeps me intentional. It allows me to be my authentic self and have a good time and spread awareness and hope to everybody. What's important now? And I think we shared that same philosophy. All I've got is this present moment we're sharing right now. And I just want to make the best of it. You know, I believe I was stroked. God stroked me for something great, you know, and I just want to spread awareness. I just need to it took me a bit, but I finally learned to recognize my signs, yawning a lot, then my brain shuts down, I fall asleep. You have to recognize the signs, and it's so important. Live in the present, stay in the present. The past is anxiety, the future is worry. Leslie Hadley, one of my great friends, she teaches yoga from her wheelchair. She's a strong woman. I just love her. People are commenting, what's important now? Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Denise. And oh, it's a good idea, Paul. I come up with them every once in a while when I have a moment. So I want to give you the floor because you have so much insight. I learned it before I got on the interview. I was just shocked how much insight you have, how you're well-spoken. I can feel strength coming from you. So I'm going to approach this 3 ways. If you could say anything to anybody that didn't have a stroke, what would you tell them, and how would you expect to be treated? So go ahead.
Okay. One thing that my journey has taught me that I would tell people is it's okay to make yourself a priority. In my pre-stroke life, I was all about, putting my patients first, putting my family first. I was at the bottom of the list, and when I would finally do something for myself, I felt guilty. I would be reading a book, and so when I had my stroke, I had no choice. I had to make myself a priority, and that was the first time in my life that I did that. And I thought, why did it take me having a stroke to be okay with making myself a priority? And so I do now.
That's the only you got.
Well, and that's it. If I want to go to the gym and there's dishes that need to be done, they're still going to be there pretty sure when I get home. Or it's okay to say no. If a friend says, not all the time, but if a friend said, can you help me with this? And I'm having a bad day, it's okay to say, you know what? No, I'm really sorry, but I can't today. So it's okay to make yourself a priority.
Can I say something to you? I really needed to hear that today because I tend to focus on everybody else still. And so thank you for sharing that. Carla is one of my favorite people. I wear her daughter's bracelet, Kayla's comeback crew. She had 37 surgeries. And Carla had to say goodbye to Kayla 37 times and hope for the best. Pray, pray, pray. And she said, I wish people could understand the neuro-fatigue. I can see at the moment Kayla hits the wall, but so many times people call her lazy or say she's quitting. She's not quitting at all. I'm so proud of her. If you could say one thing to people about the rude behavior, what would you say?
About the rude behavior?
When you run, yes.
I used to internalize it when it first started happening, and I would come home and I'd mull it over in my brain. I can't believe that they said that, and I'm so embarrassed, and how could they? And then I realized that it's their issue, it's not mine. It's their issue if they think I'm stupid or if they, but in my heart, I'm doing the best that I can. And by mulling it over, I'm giving them my power. And, or they're having power over me. And they're probably on to something else and don't even remember the incident. Meanwhile, I'm playing it over and over and over. And why am I doing that to myself? So just not to internalize it and realize it's their issue, not make it my issue, and move on.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. I'm going to do something as a gift. I'm going to order 5. Just pick up the peg as soon as I get off the show. And sometime next week, I'm going to have a giveaway. And I believe you are one of the most important people I've ever interviewed. Thank you. Thank you for being so hopeful. Thank you for being so intentional. Thank you for being a warrior. Thank you for thriving. Thank your husband, Bill, for standing by you. It's a great story. Until next week, I always say this, be blessed, be blessed. May the speech be with you because you never know when you're gonna wake up and it's not, so be thankful. If you could say this with me, remember, hope is on the way. Hope.
Hope is on the way.
Thank you very much. And have a level 10 week. And be sure and Angie, I'm going to log you off. Be sure and log back on so I can talk to you. Have a blessed week. Have a phenomenal week. Thank you, Angie, for all you have done in giving us so much hope. Bye for now. Bye.